Control. Stress comes from perceived control or a perceived lack thereof. We make this case time and time again, theoretically, empirically, consistently, that stress is really informed by our perceptions of our choices, right? Which equates to resources. So if I have a situation, I get into a car accident and my deductible is $500. I get into a car accident, my deductible is $500. Getting into a car accident is going to be stressful enough. But if I don't have that $500, that situation, right, moves into what we call a threat, okay? Basically, we experience an event, and if it is a stressor, it's either a challenge stressor or a threat stressor. It's a threat stressor when we doubt our resources. Now, these could be personal resources, intrapersonal resources, like persistence, punctuality, creativity, insight. Could be any one of those nice, delicious qualities. Or those resources could be something as simple as time, money, people, okay? When we think about resources and we try to really wrap our brain around whether or not something is a threat, it really comes down to perceived resources. So when people, like one of the questions that asked, how do you prevent stress? How do you cope with it most effectively? Be aware of your resources, right? Have a broad network of individuals. The research is pretty funny. When we looked last week, or not last week, but on Monday, about the difference between wealth, right, and how that impacts stress, people who had more money were less stressful. Well, we also saw some changes in that as well. What we do see is that people who have more money actually have a lower quality of life and less well-being. They might not have the same stress or the same amount of stress as we folks do, but they end up experiencing a lesser quality of life, not because they are wealthy, but because of all the stress that comes with being wealthy. Okay, so there's some stresses that are mitigated by wealth, and then there are other stresses that only show up because of wealth. But really, when we're talking about coping, we're talking about control. We're talking about what I perceive being available. Your book also talked about Martin Seligman, our father of positive psychology. Well, he's also the same researcher that tortured the puppies, right? Put the dogs in the cage where there was a little ledge part of the time where the puppy would be shocked by the grate and the puppy could jump over and get away from the shock. And then eventually Martin Seligman blocked off that escape, and so the puppy couldn't escape the shock. So then when the puppy was placed back in the cage that had that shock on one side, no shock on the other, and the puppy could jump out, the puppy didn't jump out. And he coined the term learned helplessness because that puppy learned through a series of events, right? It was conditioned, okay? Reinforcement, right? The puppy gets shocked, it wants to get out, it can't get out, so it just stops trying to get out. Okay, just stops trying to get out and just stays there and takes that irritant. Martin Seligman talks very frequently about regretting having done such a study. But that is one of the reasons why he started to focus so much on positive psychology and how do we capitalize and create greater well-being. Let's do a study where we experiment with just how much joy we can create in your life, right? Hell yeah, that's the science that I want to do. But what we learned with this learned helplessness, or what we've come to understand with this learned helplessness theory, is that somebody can experience something time and time and time and time and time and time again, and then just give up, which means that they have shifted their control. Okay, so when we think about being presented with a situation, a circumstance, and we see that we're either going to be challenged or we're going to experience a threat. The challenge says, you know what? I don't know exactly what's happening here. I'm pretty sure I got the skills or the resources to navigate that. It's a threat when we don't. So if I get into that car accident and my deductible is $500 and I have that money, it's a challenge. If I don't, then it becomes a threat. Okay? And all of that is about perceived control. Now, I already mentioned this a little bit, but I want to expand upon it a little bit more. Social support when it comes to coping one of the most fascinating things that I learned in my graduate studies is I read an article once, and I hadn't seen it replicated anywhere, so that's why I don't think very many spaces and places actually talk about it. But what we have seen in physiological research is that I'm fitted up with the cortisol, the sweaty palms, the respiration, and the heart rate, and I'm stressed out, right? I'm really concerned about something that's happening in my life. So I'm having a physiological stress response. And what we have found in our science is that if I'm having this physiological stress response and I talk to somebody, physiologically, my body starts to calm down. Not with a solution, not with any insight, not with a problem solved, but merely having somebody else to just share that with, the experience of catharsis, the term that Freud coined. Sharing with somebody else cuts the physiological consequences of stress, sometimes as much as in half. So having somebody that you can tell these things to is central, right? That social support is central. Not only does that help us see our resources, right? So things are more likely to be experienced as a challenge rather than a threat, but they also help us regulate. They also help us take care, even if all they do is listen. No solutions provided. There's just genuine caring and a willingness and an interest in your well-being. So, social support, pretty freaking important. Problem versus emotion-focused coping. There are some significant gender differences here, okay? Emotion-focused coping, I want to deal with my emotional experience of being stressed out. I want to navigate how I am feeling, okay? We're talking about really looking at not a solution to the problem, but being focused on my feelings about the problem. Problem-focused coping, right, is solution finding, is where we stay focused and we localize our resources on the car is broken, you don't have the money, where are we going to get the money? Who can we ask? What can we do? Okay? Emotion-focused coping, the individual is going to be like, okay, how do you feel? You're feeling scared, you're feeling angry. Okay, scared and angry are valid and, important emotions to be having, totally expected given the situation. Is I'm going to have you take this, and what I'm going to have you do is I'm going to have you figure out where each one of these goes into Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So you might have to refer to your book or go back to your notes. And I'm not saying that each one of these areas of well-being fits in, like not every single level of Maslow's hierarchy might be represented. But what I want to see is what you're thinking and how you come to understand how well-being is also part of this this state of needs, right? All of these things we need, but the majority of them we don't pay attention to, okay? And we don't actually treat it with the same degree of recognition. Like, I've already walked over maybe once or twice and gotten a drink of water, right? In our culture, carry your water bottle, drink as much as you can, fill it up before you come to campus because there's no fucking place to fill it up on campus right now. But we know that. That's an easy conversation. Nobody's walking around saying, take deep breaths, right? Think about whether or not this is something you can control. Think of, we don't have that as much in our culture. It's growing. Unfortunately, it's a little bit, it is, I'm thinking of the word toxic, and that's not the word that I want. It's confounded, right? It's compromised. It's contaminated by our focus on self-help. Our focus on self-help and self-care, both of which I absolutely love. But what we're losing is the science. The message ends up being focused on give yourself a good facial, or if you can't control it, don't care about it, things like that. And that's just not possible, right? I can make small choices to influence the environment, even though I can't control what that person chooses to do. I have some agency there. And so And thinking about all those things and taking into consideration what informed your answers on the well-being assessment. So when we talk about well-being and how do we facilitate that, when I took that well-being exercise this morning, because I like to take them several times, I started thinking about how they might map on to our PERMA, right? The Science of Flourishing by Martin Seligman. And it wasn't as intuitive to me as the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, hence the reason why you guys did that exercise. And hopefully that solidifies for you that this well-being isn't this abstract, bougie, decadent, entitled, you know, entity that's available just to people of privilege. Well-being is central to functioning. It's central to success, and it's central to survival. We have 1 minute until I need to let you guys skedaddle. So don't worry, we'll talk about some well-being again very, very soon.